Welcome, everybody. We're going to be showing the solution for the Unit 3 exercise from last week. If you do recall and you watched the lecture video for Unit 3, we did work through the first two parts of the exercise. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click through into the exercise here in Brightspace so you can see the entirety of the spreadsheet. So when you're all done with your work, the spreadsheet should look like this. This should be all the columns and all the data that we're going to run our formulas through should generate the values that you see here. And I think the columns that are blank in the spreadsheet that we download are basically the federal tax, the retirement, the terms served down here that we put formulas in those spots. And then there's stuff on the other tab too that we're going to talk about. All of the instructions are in this PDF here. And just kind of to go through what we did last time so we have a basis for like where we're going from and to. We began by looking at this first little piece here, and if you read through this, what we did is we looked at these employees here that work at this place, whatever it is, and I'm not even looking, I guess, Aspen's Falls City Hall, and how many terms that they serve, I'm guessing on the console. And let's bring up the spreadsheet here in the forefront and take a look at that particular thing. So this information was hard-coded in here, right? So the terms that they've served. However, this was not. And the big takeaway on this one was the if formula. And what I'm going to do here is I'm widening the column just so we can see the formula a little bit more clearly. But basically, we were working with this formula, and the point was, if whatever was in this column here for this person in column C, if it was greater than or equal to 4 terms, then if that was true, we would put in a yes in this column, meaning they should retire from the council, or no if it's false, and they could still serve some more, right? So that's the formula that we were shooting for. And if you guys remember, we put that together and walked through the process. And what we're seeing here now is the result of that formula. So you see one of the council members did reach 4 terms. So the retire flag, if you will, the true false is set that, yeah, they should retire. So that was the first exercise. The second thing that we had to do had us going to the second tab, and a lot of spreadsheets, right? And will have multiple tabs like this, right? And this is one of the cool things about spreadsheets is I can have one tab for one thing, another tab for something else. The tabs are related, right? So this deals with payroll stuff. This deals with a list of all the employees. And you can see some of the columns that are provided here, right? Some pretty basic, information. And here in the tail end column, we were asked to do a couple different things in the instructions. So we wanted to use the concatenate function and the proper functions to basically take the first and the last name and concatenate them. So like those of you that are in this class should have had Python programming already, so that should be a term you're kind of familiar with. But if you maybe didn't hear it well while you were in the Python class, concatenate means to join together text or strings of characters, right? And first and last name very typically are a text, right? And to join a first and a last name together is basically to get a full name, right? And this is very common. You'll notice that for whatever reason, this dump of data in this table, and you can see it in the background here, it could be because it's an old database system, or maybe it was, how they typed it in the first place, but all the names are all uppercase, both the first name and the last name for whatever reason, right? It is not unusual actually in old database systems to do that, because it makes the text processing more lightweight, right? So you don't have to deal with upper and lowercase letters, you just deal with uppercase. So it's not like that weird, actually to see information like that. There's also other reasons people do that too. So for example, like if you're sending a piece of mail through the postal service, right? So some of you might not think of this reason, but a lot of companies would put first and last name in all uppercase in their database systems, because then when they would do like a mail merge to send that person a piece of mail, it's already all uppercase, which the post office prefers when their OCR software that processes addresses automatically reads that, it prefers all uppercase, right? And think about why. And this is kind of a really weird thing, but when I have capital letters, and maybe the letter A is a great example, a capital A is a capital A, right? But a lowercase a, how would somebody create a lowercase a? Well, I can think of a few different ways that somebody could write a lowercase a, right? And maybe you guys aren't like resonating with that a lot, but there's also like different fonts will have different looking lowercase a's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it has to do with OCR ultimately. So the concatenate function joins the strings together, and the proper function then turns it into what we call title case, where the first letter is capital, all the rest are lower, and then with the next logical word, the first letter is capital and then all lowercase. And so we managed to do that here by taking two functions. Once again, I'm going to expand the column here and click into the formula area so you can see the formula clearly. But the concatenate function is this one, and that one has the parameters is what are we concatenating, right? And so the B2 and the C2, and you can see them color coded here, those are the things we're joining. What's in the middle is the joining character, right? So I could join them without like a space in between, but if I don't put the space in between, then, you know, for example, Arlene Bagan won't have a space between her first and last name, so it doesn't look good. So we're joining cell B2 to cell C2, but we're putting a space in between. And could I have added more stuff in between it? Yeah, sure, I sure could have, right? So that's the inner function. Once that function happened, then we took the results of that function, and notice how that's inside of another function. So this is kind of where it's like programming, right? So like I can put like, you know, like a math function inside of a print statement. That's kind of an equivalent. And then once they're joined together, then it switches it to title case with using the proper function. If I were to strip away, and I'm just going to do this temporarily, the proper function, right, you would just join them with all uppercase letters because that's what we're feeding in, right? So that's not what we want. Once we had that formula set, then you were able to double click that little square in the corner, right? That's a really slick trick. And it copied that formula down all of those cells and did it automatically. Talk about some magic, right? Yeah, that's why Excel is cool, right? Because like once you set up a formula correctly, you can kind of, it's not really automation necessarily, but almost, right? It sure beats like even clicking and dragging the formula down or copy paste like 50,000 times or whatever, right? Excel is built to do all these clever little tricks, by the way. Okay, so those are the first two exercises. Then we get to the third one, and this is one that we didn't complete, but let's look at the instructions here first. I'm just going to zoom in just a tad so it's a little more readable, and maybe that was a little excessive, but there we go. It says the vlookup function finds values in a lookup table, and the function searches down the table's first column using the vlookup, calculate the federal tax paid for each employee in the tax table as a guide at B13. So we'll look at that cell in just a second. And the gross wages H are used as a reference to calculate the federal tax in I. All right. So in other words, the way that VLOOKUP works is to calculate the federal tax, I need to know the gross wages. That'll look up the wages in this table. Now, you notice there's no exact match for like 1100, but the way that this table works is from 500 up to 999 or just shy of 1,000, the tax rate's 18%. When you get into over the $1,000 range, it's 22%, et cetera, right? And this is one of the harsh realities of earning more money, folks, by the way, is the more money you earn, the more taxes they take, right? You know, it should be that way, right? It's kind of fair, right? If you make more money, you can afford to pay a little bit more, right? So it totally is a good system, right? VLOOKUP allows us to basically do an approximate match. So if it falls into range, it picks that up and gives you the right tax rate. And then we use this tax rate multiplied against the gross wages to get to this number. You know, so for example, if this person's earning $1,100, they fall in the $1,000 range. So they really should be multiplying against 0.22 and that number to come up with 242. And you could pull out your calculator and test that if you wish, right? So I don't think that's unreasonable to do that. The other thing I'll remind you is a spreadsheet is basically a calculator also, so you could like test the math right in the spreadsheet if you wish. All right. So these columns right now are blank, but we're going to fill these in. And I'm going to compose the formula in this cell. So I'm going to make it wider so you can see it clearly, and hopefully that's going to be wide enough. We'll see. But we are using VLOOKUP. We're told what to use. So we type equals to start the formula. Then we start typing VLOOKUP. And you notice I just typed 2 letters. It found it. Now I'm going to double click the formula to pull it into the cell. Then what Excel does, and this part is a little harder to see, and I can't make this bigger, unfortunately, is it highlights what comes next. And it says the lookup value. What value are we looking up to get the tax rate? Well, that's going to be the gross wages. So I click on that cell, right? Then I move on to the next expression. So I type a comma, and it says, where am I looking up the values? And if you notice down here, we have the values in this table, but one is the range and one is the actual multiplier. So I list the whole table, both columns. So I don't know if you caught that, but I just clicked and dragged, and you'll notice the cell reference is C14, which is this cell, all the way down to D17. And notice how that's listed, C14 colon D17, and it covers a range and includes all the cells in between. All right, the other problem is when I take this formula and I copy it down to the next cell below, it's going to want to shift that to C15 to D18, but that's not what we want. We want it to always be locked into C14 to D17. So when you have your cursor still on this expression, you can press your F4 key and it inserts dollar signs in front of the letters, the columns basically, and the numbers, the rows, right? So this locks in the row, locks in the column, and it does it for all 4 of the expressions. So C, $C, $14, $D, $17, all right? And this part is really important because if you don't do this, then your formula goes off and breaks, all right? So let's put another comma in, and now it's looking for the column index number of where the value is that we actually want to retrieve. What we want to retrieve is the federal tax rate. That's in the second column. This is column 1, that's column 2. So here I'm typing a 2. I want the information in the second column. Then another comma, and now it says the range lookup. And notice there's 2 values here, and I can type this in one of 2 ways. I can type true, all caps, or false, all caps, or 1 or 0. 1 is true, 0 is false, right? So if you ever see a 0 in the 4th position, it's a false. If you ever see a 1, it's a true. So the first value, true, says approximate match. That's the one that we want because, for example, $1,100 isn't listed in the table. It's in the range, right? So we're going to go with true. So I'm going to press enter, and I screwed up, and I should not have pressed enter. I should have. All right, let's go back in there, and I'm going to retype the comma, and I'm going to double click true, right? Or you can type it, right? So I'm going to type true, and then I'm going to press enter. Okay, that's great. it pulled back the 0.22, which is correct. But when I look at the result, it really should say 242. So what I need to do is I pulled back the right piece of information here, but I still need to multiply that against the gross wages. So I have to add that to the formula. So at the tail end of the formula, I put in the multiplication symbol and I click back on the cell that we're trying to multiply against. And there you go, 242. Good. So I still had to do the math. That pulled back the rate, but I also had to convert that rate into a dollar amount. Now, granted, you could have like made a column for the rate and then multiplied it, right? But that's not how that we were asked to do it. All right. So now I should be able to pull that formula down. And then you'll notice with the solution, right? All the numbers do match up, right? So you got a few people at the $1,100 range, so they have the same rate. You have some people at the $850 range, they have the same rate. So that was the formula there. And just in case you need to see it again really quick, there you go. All right, and then I'm going to press escape to lock it in. All right, now we need to work on the retirement column, and the instructions for that are very similar. So they're kind of doing the same thing. They want us to look up the terms they've served and then the rate for retirement. So in other words, the more terms you've served, the higher retirement rate you get. So like the financial impact of it is greater. All right. So let's try this one. So this will be kind of repeating the same formula in a sense, right? So we are still going to do a vlookup. So I'm going to double click that now that it's come up, or you can type it all the way out. You might have the question, does it have to be all caps? The answer is no. You can actually type the formula name lowercase. It still works. All caps is considered the correct way. Which value are we looking up? Are we looking up the gross wages this time? Nope. We're looking up the terms, right? So I'm going to go to the terms and then put in a comma. Where's the table where we're looking it up? Well, that's this table down here, the blue one. So I'm going to highlight the values in that table. There's 2 columns. F4 to put in the dollar signs or type them in, either way. A comma. Which value do we want to return? The second column. And then do we want an approximate match or an exact match on this one? Yeah, it's an exact match, right? Because there's no fractional portions, right? It's either 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you get beyond 4, you're retired, right? So we're going to just go ahead and click false. It seems like a counterintuitive because we're looking for an exact match, but that's how the formula works. And then close the parentheses. I'm going to press enter. So it is correctly for 3 terms, bringing up 0.13. So that's correct. However, once again, that's not really the value we're looking for. We need that multiplied now against what? The gross wages. So now we're going to go back into this formula. So I highlighted the cell, clicking in the formula bar, and then once again, I'm going to multiply against the gross wages. I press enter, and there's your 143. Now I can take that formula and copy it down, and there are your answers, and you'll notice how they match up, right? Including the total. Once again, just to show you the formula, it's in its entirety with the multiplication at the end. There you go. All right. And then there's one more here to complete, and that's the countif function. And the way that they want us to do this is basically they want us to look at how many people have served how many terms and then make a list of how many have served that certain number of terms. That's the best way I can say it, I guess, the clearest. So in other words, they're looking how many people have served only 1 term. Well, I can look at the list and just say, well, none. Right? Everybody's done 2 or more, right? So you could just look and type it in because the list is so small. But once again, what if it was 10,000? You're not doing that, right? So the point is, yeah, there's other ways you could figure it out. But let's do it with a formula. Once again, I'm going to expand the column here just so you can see the formula being typed out. And we're going to use count if for this. So I'm going to double click it now that it's up on screen. We're supposed to select the range, like where are we looking, to make this determination, and that's going to be all the terms up here. Notice the syntax, right? C5 to C9, and once again, because the formula is going to be copied down, right? We really should put the dollar signs in, right? But I want you to, this is really kind of weird what happens with this one, and I don't know if you guys experienced it yourselves. The other thing that we're looking for is the criteria. And what's the criteria? Well, would it be these values here? Anybody agree with me or disagree? Nobody's saying anything. All right, let's just put in this range here, right? These are the possible terms. Okay, I got a thumbs up from somebody. And then I'm going to close this. All right, okay. Why did it autofill the rest? Yeah, this is really kind of weird what it just did. All right, so let me just bring the formula back up on screen. So here it's looking at these values here. And I would argue, okay, I should probably hit F4 on this one too, right? Just to put in and actually F4 on both, right? So both ranges should get the dollar signs. But then what happened down here, and oops, all right, I'm going to press enter to lock that in, and it's correct. How many people served only one term? None, right? How many people served two? You notice it's using the same formula, but and notice it says the value contained in this cell is spilled from the formula in cell G14. To delete this value, we'll need to modify that formula. So this is a really weird kind of effect. And I just want, this is one that's like noteworthy to talk about, because what it assumed is because I was using a whole range of values, like in this term here, right? So this part of it, it's using that whole range of values. It's saying to itself, wait a second, you're using a whole range of values for the second thing. So that means you're implying that you really want the same formula, but relative to the certain terms to be copied down, but it doesn't actually copy it down. It's all in the first formula. You guys feel where I'm going with that, right? All right. So there's an alternate approach, and some of you probably did it like this. I have not looked at your work yet, so I don't really know. But the alternate approach here would be, instead of looking at the range, I just look at the one value, right? Once again, I would put dollar signs on that. So now the other formulas don't apply now. You see what happened, right? Because it's not a range and a range. It's a range. It's a range in a single value, right? But now I could take this formula and copy it down. And what happened there? Okay, so here's the troubleshooting on that. Well, I put dollar signs on E14. I shouldn't have. All right. So this is also kind of showing you what's happening, because all of these now, oops. Okay. All of these now, if you look up here, have the same, they're all referring to that cell, which is incorrect. The dollar sign locks it into that cell. It's not what we want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these three. Make sure that I don't have the dollar signs here. I'm going to get rid of them. Oops. Okay. See, I'm trying to like click off of there. This is just bad computing practice on my part. All right. Enter. All right. So now it's locked in. Let's make sure. Now I should be able to drag that formula down. And the second cell, or the second range or whatever, will follow, because we don't have the dollar signs on it. And this is really an important aspect of Excel, you guys, right? Like this, why do we put the dollar signs in? Because the dollar signs lock this range in. It's always referring to this range. This one doesn't have the dollar signs, so it moves with the formula down the spreadsheet, right? So this is, for the people that are new to Excel and have not done formulas before, this might be revelatory. You know, for people that have seen this before, you might be like, I know it's important, but I'm not sure why. Oh yeah, oh, okay, that makes sense. Maybe hopefully reinforcing. I think it's interesting though that you could do it either way. So like if I, once again, in this first formula, if I declare this is the whole range of values here, it auto fills the rest of them. Yeah, so that's really weird that it operates like that. Um, when I work through the exercise, right, and so any exercise I give you guys, I always work through it myself. I did it the first way I showed you. I'm like, oh yeah, right, it auto propagates. I forgot, you know, because that's how I would just do it, right? And I think most of you probably did it this way, but where each one's individual. That would be my speculation without having checked your homework. All right, so that completes um, those exercises. The other part of the exercise was to answer the reflection. Okay, so some of you might be like, oh, now I got to type words. I guess I should um, open up a Word document and type up the reflection. All right. Here's the thing, you can type these answers right into a spreadsheet if you wish. So like, for example, like if I was going to type this stuff up, I might actually go as far as like copying that stuff, going over to the spreadsheet and just, pasting it down here, and maybe moving it around and making it, and then just respond right in the cell. That would be a fine way to do it, right? Um, and really, I want you to note here, this is a reflection. So this is kind of like having you think back on what you just did and what you just learned and how you're reacting to it. Um, and I do have one question, but I'm going to call this a solution, and I am going to stop the video here, and then I'll field all the questions.